After a brilliant response on my previous episodes, I am back with a compilation of 7 night shift horror stories. But before I begin, make sure that you have subscribed to Mr. Scare. We have surpassed 2,000 subscribers now, and let's rush to 3,000 subscribers. I don't exactly work a night shift, but I get off work later than the average person in the workforce. And when I leave my office, I have to take a 1.5 hour of train or bus ride to get home. And I regularly see some weird and creepy people at bus stop late at night. I could give a lot of random stories of weird, eerily funny, or scary things that have happened at these bus stops. But this one incident has stuck with me. And it still bothers me when I think about it. It was this random dude talking to someone on the phone. He had a hood on, so I couldn't actually see the phone, but I figured it was a phone in his hand, since he was pausing for a response after saying a line or two. I mean, there was always a possibility that the dude was a meth head who just smoked up and got to the bus stop and started speaking to himself. Generally, people who are just rambling to nobody don't take those pauses. So he's ranting about how the Constitution is a universal law, and the amendments weren't hammered in enough to support it correctly, and how when you take vitamins, you sweat toxins out of your feet after. He even paused during his explanation of how that worked and clarified something that he had mentioned previously. I mean, it was at a normal level of crazy for a phone conversation, and nothing too weird to be honest. But then he started saying something that I still can't forget.
So, this is how I speak to myself. This is how I speak to myself, and I speak to myself all the time because I have to. That is because that's the only way to realize the truth. Every single thing that they ever told you is a lie, a big fat lie, and you've got to talk to yourself to stop being indoctrinated. You know, when the teachers all said, be a good kid and stay in school. And they wouldn't lie to you, you would think your teacher wouldn't lie to you. But they do. They just don't want us to see through their lies. They don't want us to see and know and understand what the government does. And the last thing that they would ever want is for us to learn how to harness those powers. I might sound like a lunatic right now, but you have to trust me. I took this pill and now my eyes have opened. I can see everything clearly. This is all an illusion. This is all one cage that they have put us in. We have to find our way out. And I will help you find it.
He was starting to cry at that point. I was creeped out. Not by what he said, but by his increasing rage and anxiety. He seemed to be on the edge. And I was the only one around him. The last thing I'd want is to catch his attention. I froze in my seat as he continued ranting. Then he rushed up the stairs on the side that led to a medium-sized overbridge. I was relaxed as he was going away from where I was. And I could also see the headlights of the bus approaching. I guess he didn't have anyone on the phone with him after all. It was just his hand on his jaw while he spoke to himself all this while. My eyes widened with shock as I watched the next series of events unfold after my eyes. As the bus was passing through the underpass, this crazy dude shouted,
"Let's wake up from this!"
and jumped off the bridge. I saw him fall down and crash into the bus from the top. He wasn't falling from a height that would kill him. So he landed with a loud thud and got severely injured. The driver came out stressed. He was worried about his job, and I assured him that it wasn't his fault in any sense. I called the ambulance instead of trying to help the drug addict. I felt bad about it, but it's not a good idea to engage with an obviously unstable drug addict regardless, so I did not walk up to him to try and put some sense in his head. The paramedics arrived and took him away. But that incident still bothers me. I worked the night shift at a large grocery store. The store wasn't open overnight, but it had a skeleton crew to work on the loads and do preparations and clean up the place. I worked near the entrance of the store. It had large glass doors, but it was visually blocked off from my vantage point. Around 2:30 a.m., I hear knocking on the doors. This isn't completely unusual to me, because usually it's someone coming in for an early shift, but didn't carry a key card to open it. Or sometimes it's someone's food delivery, or at times a customer who thinks we are open despite clearly being closed. I approach the door, and it's a man that I don't recognize. He was drenched from the rain that was pouring outside. He looks normal enough, but something about him unnerved me. He had that vibe to him that alerted my senses. He had the vibe where it seems like maybe they were on their way to becoming full-blown meth head, but for now, they still managed to give the appearance of being normal. He was holding his shit together just enough to appear normal, but the edges were definitely shaky. Anyway, without unlocking the door, I announced that the store was closed. He told me that he just needed my help because his car had broken down in the parking lot and he needed a boost. I didn't drive, so I told him I couldn't help him. Now I should have walked away then and there, but he was out in the rain, and I genuinely felt bad for him, so I told him I would see if anyone of our little crew did drive. I did find someone who was willing to help, and also got the night crew manager involved too. We went out, and it turned out that he was parked a bit off from the entrance, in a fairly secluded spot, and he had a lady with him. There was a similar vibe with her too. I mean almost, but not exactly normal. It didn't click right away, but I figured they had been hooking up in the car in the parking lot, and maybe left the radio or lights on, and drained the battery. To me, that explained the weird unnerving feeling that they either felt ashamed or guilty, and it was showing through their body language. Anyway, my coworker goes over to help give them a boost. The manager and I stay out there with him, watching him for any sneaky moves. The two lovebirds kept peeking over at us a bit uncomfortably. And after a few moments, the coworker returns from the car and then hurried us to go back inside the store. We don't see them drive off, which seems odd. We get inside, lock up again, and then the coworker thanks us for staying out there with him and not leaving him alone with them. He also caught on to the unnerving air about them, and it made him worried about his safety. What worried him more was when it also turned out that there was absolutely nothing wrong with their car. We aren't sure what they wanted. Were they trying to kidnap one of us that would have come out alone instead of in a group? I mean, if I would have gone out to help, then they had ample opportunity to take me with them. And in our store, such cases have happened before where people have gone missing. I am thankful to myself for being alert and sensible in handling the situation. I work the night shift and I absolutely hate recalling this story. I work the night shift at a rehabilitation facility. We have a protected gate with a camera looking down from above. And we also have one of those doorbell cameras. In the office, the camera's monitor is on one wall and the doorbell monitor is on the opposite wall. I was doing some paperwork that night and I saw this random dude walk past the facility's entrance, then stop for a few seconds, and then slowly turned around, subsequently walking back only to stare up at the camera like a creep. And he didn't stop after a moment. He just kept staring into the soul of the camera. Now the facility where I work is in a rough neighborhood, so I'm fairly used to such dudes hanging out around the gate, and I usually ignore it. But the way he was staring down at the camera was off-putting. Apart from staring endlessly, his eyes and his expressions were hollow and dead, almost as if he were in deep thought about something sinister. I was pretty sure he was high on something or the other. I used the intercom to see if he was okay, but he just kept staring directly at the camera without responding to my questions. We have a rule that we follow at our workplace. If the person outside is not hurt or trying to come through the fence, just let them be doing whatever they are. No sense in engaging needlessly with somebody who is potentially hostile. It would be like inviting unnecessary danger. So he stood there and stared at that camera for 2 hours straight. He didn't move too. I had to endure that same dead-eyed expression, staring right at me for 2 hours through the monitor. I tried to focus on my paperwork, and there were no other colleagues with me that night. So it made it even more creepy. After some time, I did a round inside the facility as per my routine, and came back to find him gone. Now that only creeped me out more. I mean, where did he go? Did he climb inside? I waited in the facility until the morning staff arrived. I did not know how to handle the camera's software. Else I would have rewinded the part where he left, to get some closure. But I didn't. This story did not happen to me. So it is not my personal creepy encounter, but I used to work at a small motel, and the manager there told me a terrifying night shift story. It was about half an hour past midnight when she got a call at the front desk. She picked it up and it was from a man. Instead of inquiring about booking a room or anything about the address, the man just said that he was with his 18-year-old daughter, who supposedly dances at a competitive level, and he needed advice on what she should wear for a competition. She gave him some basic fashion advice. He asked my manager,
What about fishnet leggings? Do you think those are too sexy to wear?
She was creeped out by that line itself. But later he proceeded to talk in unnecessary graphic detail about how he thought that his own daughter had been trying to seduce him for weeks, and how he had started to enjoy seeing her dance in those cute outfits. My manager kept stalling him on the call despite all the creepiness, and meanwhile, she was looking through a computer system, trying to figure out who this man was, so she could call the cops. However, the room that he was reportedly in was empty. Unfortunately, the man ended up hanging up the phone call before she could find out where he was truly calling from. A couple of months later, at around 11:30 p.m., my manager answers the desk phone. A familiar voice asked her if she could help him pick out an outfit for his daughter's next dance recital. She replied,
Let me guess, you might want to know if she should wear fishnet leggings? Am I correct?
The man immediately hung up the phone and never called again. I hope he was just talking shit while fantasizing, instead of it being a reality. I worked the night shift at a popular coffee shop. I can't name it because I don't want this to escalate. It was about 3:30 a.m., and there is one old baker in the back that rarely interacts with me apart from a dirty joke in between. He always claimed that he was from the Navy, but I hardly think so. Other than that, I'm working all alone at night. And not just in the coffee shop, but there isn't another soul around the area as well. I mean, of course, it was sleeping time for regular people, and I expected it to remain that way for at least an hour from then. I was filling up the food boxes that were a day old so that I could give them to the homeless shelter. As I was doing it, I swear I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. I could see the movement in my peripheral vision, and whatever it was right behind me. I turn around and see no one. And as my eyes are searching everywhere, I gasp as I look down. There was a small child standing there. A native little toddler with a faux hawk, who was for some reason staring at me intensely. I'm dumbstruck by how absurd the situation was. How did she get behind the counter? I didn't hear the door open or see him come through the counter either. I scanned the storefront with a quick glance. There was no one there. I yelled for the baker in case he has a friend or someone visiting that had possibly lost their kid. The baker comes over, and just like me, he does a double take at the kid and is equally baffled. If it wasn't weird already, suddenly the kid starts muttering incoherently. I get him a glass of water and a donut, while the baker runs out of the store to do a perimeter check of the block. I called the non-emergency line, and I explained that I had found a little kid with no parents. I tried speaking to the kid, but I just couldn't get any information from the boy. He was responding, but more often than not, he was just mumbling something which I couldn't make out at all. The police arrive after a few minutes. The baker had come back from the block, and he said that he couldn't find anyone else in the streets. The guy from the corner store that used to be open 24/7 said that he would keep an eye out. The police try to speak to the kid, and they also get nothing but mutterings and half-hearted gestures. They take him away to the police station. I see the cops again for their morning coffee, and they told me that the little Ed guy walked several miles from the nearest reservation in the dead of night to my store. He had gotten into his parents' medicine cabinet and just walked out of the house. I was stunned. It must have taken those poor baby hours to get to my store. And seeing him behind me like that in the dead of the night still shakes me. It spooked me more than the guy that threw a cup of coffee at me, and the woman that tried to stab me with a plastic spoon because I refused to give her a metal one. It was in fact scarier than the dude that waited around for 4 to 5 hours, hoping to catch me alone just so that he could teach me a lesson, since I didn't have the flavor of bagel that he desired to eat. Night shifts are either fully peaceful or absolutely crazy. There is no in-between here. During my early 20s, I used to work night shifts at a Home Depot. There was one time when for a week or so, our store stayed open for 24 hours. Most of the time, this wasn't really a problem for us workers over there. As in typically, nobody comes shopping for home improvement items at 3 in the morning. I mean, in those 2 weeks, only 2 or 3 times did anyone show up at that hour. There was this one couple that came looking for marble countertops at 1:30 a.m. in the morning, and the woman was wearing a nasty dress. Apart from them, there was also this one young woman who came looking for a toilet paper roll holder a little after midnight. I guess there was some last-moment emergency. But the real story lies within the insulation. It was nearing 3:30 a.m. in the morning, and one guy and I were stocking insulation, as well as fixing the bays, and doing some other maintenance work. A bunch of big R30 insulations had fallen in their bay, and while I was sorting through them, a freakish hand came out of the mess and grabbed my arm. I lost my mind enough for not only the guy I was working with to freak out, but also for my boss, who was across the store and came to check out the issue. It turned out that a homeless drunkard had managed to find his way and enter through the store's security at some point. The dude was in bad shape too, as in he was far gone into whatever he was addicted to, such that we had to call the police to remove him from the store. I was always a little extra cautious and alert around the insulation bay after that, at least for the time the store stayed open for 24 hours. I worked over the night shift as the security at a convention center for a couple of years. One night at like 1 a.m., I was on camera, chit-chatting with another officer who was manned at what we called the base. I had 2 other guys and my supervisor out on patrolling duties. I saw a homeless dude go up our outdoor elevator to a public terrace, and I was keeping an eye on him. It was no big deal, to be honest. Just keeping an eye out if anything happened. He goes to a corner that is a blind spot for the cameras in the center. The corner was known to us for usually catching a quick nap. I call on the radio to our nearest patrol officer. He was also patrolling with my supervisor, and I inform him that this person was hanging out at that spot there, doing something. They casually start walking toward the area to find out what he was up to. Upon their arrival at the designated spot, the next thing I know is that on another camera directly below this terrace's corner, like 40 feet below, I see a body drop straight down and land on its legs, collapsing to the concrete floor. I quickly stand up from my chair and I am panicking, thinking of a potential suicide, or worse, a murder. I grab the first aid kit and run out of the office to go outside. My other officer on base jumps on the phone and calls the paramedics. I'm the first one there, and this homeless man was howling in pain, shattered bones protruding from his ankles, bleeding from the mouth, trying to mumble something. He manages to roll over and I see his hands are also fucked up, more bones protruding from his wrists. I don't dare to touch him, and I doubted my first aid kit would have helped at all. My supervisor and the other officers come running down the stairs to the scene. Apparently, when they arrived at the spot I told them, they saw him standing on the edge and looking down. My supervisor had called out and asked him to turn around, when he suddenly dropped dead like a plug was removed from the socket. The first responders arrive and take him to the hospital. I of course had to write the report and review the video of the incident. A cop comes an hour and a half later and shares his condition that he survived, but will most likely never walk again. A few days later, I get a new roommate who brings his girlfriend over. We're all hanging out, talking, and drinking. I share that I work for security at the place, and the new roommate's girlfriend asks me about the guy who jumped off the building. Now I was stunned. I mean, how did she even know that? There was no media coverage. She wasn't there either. Then I got to know that she was best friends with his wife. She she shares that he was a homeless alcoholic junkie. She got the call that he attempted suicide and rushed with his wife to the hospital. She told that he was better and improving well. My roommate shortly broke up, and I never saw her again. I hope he got better with time.